Our understanding of autism has evolved over the last 60 years. If you were a parent raising a child on the autism spectrum in the 1950s or 60s, there's a high probability that they were institutionalized or hidden away in the family home. Mothers were often accused of being cold and detached from their children. And when they reached out to the professionals for support, they were labeled refrigerator mothers. Over the years, research has gifted us with a better understanding of the autism spectrum. We've seen prevalence rates shift from 1 in 10,000, 1 in 250, 1 in 110, 1 in 88, and now 1 in 68. With some studies indicating that 1 in 45 is a more accurate representation. So what does this mean? If you had a school bus that on average held 50 children, that means that there's a child with autism on every school bus in Canada today. As we hone in on prevalence rates and debate the rise or the increase, here's what we know. Families are raising sons and daughters on the autism spectrum all across our country. The needs vary by the individual, but the access to support and services across the lifespan is essential. This graph from the Miriam Foundation is one of the most powerful visuals I've come across that maps out the lifespan. Not unlike you or I, we live our lives, our journey through life, we access services and support, even in times of crisis. This should not change if you have autism. 2013 actually marked one of the largest graduating classes of students with a formal diagnosis of ASD. In Nova Scotia, like many provinces across the country, it was also 15+ years since the first children that received early intensive behavioral intervention were on the tipping point of adulthood. But yet, instead of reaching that much anticipated independence, what they found is what has become known as the service cliff. So what do we do about that? We know that navigating the system is challenging. The pressures are enormous, and time, it feels like it's never on our side. One wrong step, move, decision could be the turning point that knocks everything off the rails, or at least it feels that way. Decisions are not easy for families or for individuals. In fact, decisions are also not easy for governments or service organizations. In my work with Autism Nova Scotia and now CASDA, I've had the opportunity to travel across the country and talk to government officials, professionals, families, parents, caregivers, siblings, self-advocates, and adults on the spectrum. I've seen services and programs and gaps in urban areas, rural areas, suburban areas, and even northern parts of this country. And I want to tell you a little bit about that. So here's what I discovered. Autism services in every province and territory varies. Who kind of takes the lead? Some provinces it's health, some it's education. In one province it's called something called human services. Never heard of that before, I'm from Nova Scotia. And not only that, if you're trying to access support in the education system, it can vary by district. In fact, it can vary by school. How you get a diagnosis can vary. Who can diagnose varies, right? And families talk about their journeys in the healthcare system different than their journeys in the education system. And let's just add on accessing community living on top of that. Instead of being integrated, we're still seeing families in silos. And how do we change that? Finding qualified, trained professionals in ASD can be a challenge. And if you are lucky enough to have a province that has them, conversations now about retirement are looming, right? Who is training the future leaders and the future professionals in this field? We need to be thinking about that. And let's talk for just a second about mental health services. Right across the country, they're underfunded and scarce. Not ASD specific, but we know that that's critical in this journey. But I also want to share something else. When we brought people together to talk about the possibility of a Canadian Autism partnership, at the national level, people got really excited. They really wanted to share not just the challenges, but they wanted to talk about the success stories, right? What they felt was really innovative in their province, what programs and services really worked. And everyone acknowledged that the journey is not easy for families and individuals. For the families and the adults in those sessions, imagine how validating that was. You know, maybe we are all on this path together. So the question is what does it take for us as Canadians to come together? We really need to be thinking of that to make a difference. We know that in Newfoundland, they will not be able to invest the financial resources the same way Ontario can. They just don't have the population base. Their geographical landscape looks very different. In Nunavut and Northwest Territories, as well as in Thunder Bay, Ontario, all of which have fly-in communities, services need to be more creative and flexible than they do in Victoria and Winnipeg. So again, I say, what is the tipping point? What will bring us together? Imagine the potential if we're able to share some of those findings with each other. Did you know that there are 4 ASD training programs for first responders in 4 provinces? 4. That's amazing. Online resources and e-learning opportunities right across all of the provinces. We also know that the use of technology is really increasing. It's used not just for education, but it's now starting to be used for clinical intervention. So imagine if we got together and we started to share those findings, share the learnings, and share the resources. Imagine the impact and the potential. So I'm going to leave you with a call to action, because there always has to be one. And here it is. If you are in the autism field, if you are a decision maker, a funder, someone who is passionate about making a difference, reach out and find a partner and collaborate. And when I say collaborate, I just don't mean talk to your neighbor and have a conversation. I mean really find a way to make a difference. It's not easy. If I learned anything from traveling across Canada, I've learned that autism has a crowded and sometimes competitive landscape. What we're talking about is ambitious, and it's not always going to be easy. But we can work together to make a difference for families and individuals. Imagine if in Canada, we could have one inclusive conversation about a complex issue regarding autism that brought everyone to the table. Across sectors, disciplines, didn't matter. We could get them to the table. And we did that instead of having 13 or more different conversations across all provinces and territories. That would be a game changer. Not only would we be working together more effectively to support services across the lifespan for families and people with ASD, Canada would be a global leader in autism. That's a Canada that I want to be part of, and I hope you do too. Thank you.